that there was one more stream of research which was being done. They were trying to get the users' data by letting them know. But in return, the way we would want to use that data is that we would have their actual personality scores and their complete music listening history. But what we are trying to say is that this is the paradigm which we are trying to face,
Okay.
that there might be certain dominant personality traits which you have, which will be associated to the particular emotions. So emotions from the lyrics can be used in music recommendation systems for recommending similar songs. So yes, definitely there is a reason that you might want to choose maybe an Apple Music or a Spotify, because these apps have been becoming so good in the music recommendation that what all we care about is music recommendation. We do not want to consider any other factor, but till the time the music recommendation is good, we definitely like the fact that yes, the next music is something which I would want to hear and I don't want to like interact physically to the system. Today we see that ChatGPT has evolved in a dynamic nature. The new thing come in, it already knows. When you are enacting to your music, can help us predict your music preferences as well. That is what kind of music you would want to listen. That would actually help us in keeping track of the personality, and generative AI can actually solve this problem of tracking this thing over time instead of just giving you a hard intuitive results for a statistical time. So yes, definitely there is a reason that you might want to choose maybe an Apple Music or a Spotify. These apps have been becoming so good in the music recommendation that what all we care about is music recommendation.
People can kind of infer who are close to each other and what kind of activities they perform together, all these targeted ads. It's an insane amount of data. Now, most of the inference happens from browsing. Welcome to Tech My Breath Away. Today we have with us Yudhik. He's a friend of mine, a junior that I've actually worked with back at IIIT. And he's gone on to do a lot of very, very interesting things at the intersection of music and machine learning. Today, he works at Goldman Sachs, and we are very, very curious to know the work that he has done in the past and what he's working on right now. Welcome, Yudhik.
Thank you, Abbhinav. Thank you so much. I remember the days fondly when we used to work in the Avinash's lab. That was some interesting journey. So yeah, definitely looking forward to this podcast.
Literally. Back then, like my first memory of you was from, I think we were at the NBH, the boys hostel. And there was one day that actually, I think that's a very vivid memory. You were like really, really tensed. What lab to choose? Is this the right place for me? And you had actually pinged me, and I was going to play, I think, table tennis or something. And uske baad,
Yes.
I was like, come on, let's meet up. And we had like a sort of a mini counseling session. And from there, I think like you have just come a long, long way and just gone like completely different direction. And I'm really, really proud that of all the things that you've actually done, right?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Abhinav, for those kind words. I also remember the fact that you were supposed to go to the table tennis, and I was like, okay, I just got the lab. I don't know what am I supposed to do, what it will entail, and how much work it's gonna be. So definitely everything over there, your mentorship was definitely helpful and fruitful along the journey which I had.
And as someone right who hasn't talked to you before, right? I have gotten a couple of pointers, and I'm really, really excited to hear about the work that you've done, right? Super, super interesting to share with relation to music. And
Thank you so much,
welcome
Debayan.
to our podcast.
Music is at the core of this podcast. But before we get right down to that, like we were just talking a little bit about your initial days at IIIT and just joining the lab. Uh, one thing is you have actually experimented a lot to find out what is the right fit for you, right? Initially, you were first allocated CVIT, which is the Center for Vision Information Technology, where primarily we work on computer vision problems. So you were initially allocated that lab, and you did work, I think, like a couple of semesters in 3D and found that, that is not the right equation for you. So tell me a little bit about your journey as you hop through different labs and then figure out what is like the right research problem for you to work.
So maybe I'll start off with the fact that joined the college back in 2016. So when we joined in college, we definitely knew that we are joining a dual degree. But the first initial semesters are mostly about how do we grasp the coding well. So first 3 semesters went into completely the coursework and the coding. And it was the first, like the fourth semester was the first semester where the actual research part kicks in. That you start getting worried about the fact which lab you want to choose, which professor you want to pursue, whether he should be hands-on or hands-off prof. So all those things were definitely into the in my mind. And definitely, I was progressing decently well in the college, and most of the sessions were around that computer vision is the thing, is the new thing. It's gonna be the next gen and everything. And I definitely saw a lot of cool stuff going around in computer vision. So definitely, computer vision lab was something which definitely was of interest to me. And as I joined computer vision lab alongside Avinash, I did not know how interesting things at 3D could get. It was mostly the 2D things which was mostly being dealt with different labs. But 3D was some kind of an exposure which was a completely different whole paradigm, which was completely unknown, I would say. So over there, the learning was really high. I got to experiment with a lot of different stuff, different models around it. But the learning was mostly into the parts of computer vision. And slowly I realized that after working 2, 3 semesters, I had a chance to work with you and Chaitanya Patel, where we published one paper in ICCV workshop, which I had a grateful chance to present in South Korea. So I was there in for quite a few times. And then I went on to publish one more paper alongside Neeraj in the same field of 3D. And soon I realized that there was a very close, I would say, and a big overlap in the fields of computer vision and robotics, where I joined hands with Madhav Krishna. And we were trying something on the lines of how we can actually use the power of computer vision alongside the robotics in parallel. Over there, I had a good stint working alongside him. Although there were no publications involved, but definitely there was again a lot of learning curve, which went
What were
ahead,
you
which
working on?
was
Like, what were you working on at the time? Like the from 3D to robotics, right? What was the work which the one that you were referring to, right? There was a lot of overlap.
yes. So in the part of what we were working in the ICCB was about everything of what we can do based on the molecular image, and definitely we wanted to scope things out in 3D. So
Mhm.
when we started working in the robotics lab, the angle was that how we can leverage the fact that even the drone need not have a very specialized lidar cameras or maybe a stereo setup. It can have a monocular RGB setup where we have only the single image being generated and all the processing has to be done on top of it. So our
Mhm.
main problem statement was, let's say if the drone is to be navigated in a setup where there are lots and lots of people, how we can build a drone in such a way that it would be able to navigate when there are a lot of obstacles, and also the humans present over there, because largely what we deal in the drone side is how it would be able to like thrust itself. It should be able to make it faster. But this problem statement was that although the drone is good in itself, how would you be able to make it efficient enough that it can steer along all the humans? So it was about from a single image, how we can do the depth estimation. That was the biggest challenge of that whole problem statement. And using those estimation, involving it to navigate around the people and the different obstacles. So that was the problem statement which I was addressing along with Madhav Krishna.
Just to kind of like give some more context, the problem that we had actually worked on was of 3D reconstruction. And the idea was that you give a single image of a human and you essentially want to retrieve the 3D. So 3D would be essentially 2D plus depth. I'm telling it in a very abstracted fashion. So it's 2D plus depth. So I think with robotics, with I think your drone project, essentially you have a similar problem where if you don't want to collide on another object, you have to basically estimate depth. Now there are infrared cameras which kind of do this job for you, but of course there exists the additional cost that comes with that, the computational overhead on top of that, and so much more. So if you can do the same thing again from a simple image-based camera, which is like depth estimation,
Color camera, RGB camera,
right?
that's
It makes it far easier. It makes it far easier.
And one of
commercials.
the bigger kicks was definitely about applied research, so that we had a curated solution already available for a computer vision, which we can anyways patent and things like that. We already had all those drone research going around in college. So it was definitely cool how the things plot out when the drone is moving and you can actually see those pose estimations and depth estimation being done in real time. So that was definitely fascinating.
You know, two things I want to touch upon. You said you were doing okay in, the first 2 years. You were doing well. Things are going okay. I think that's a bit of an understatement, because I think you went to the ICPC regionals twice, if I'm not mistaken.
Uh, yeah, so basically we cleared the ICPC regional with a rank of 35, if I'm not wrong. All over India rank was 35. And we went ahead for two Indian regionals in the very same ICPC. One was Kanpur and one was Amritapuri. So ICPC was something which definitely, like, competitive programming was something which I always eyed on. And I later in my second year, I went on to become the programming club coordinator as well. So definitely my vision was always that I want to be good at coding. And definitely we had such good images of Tanush Kattar, Dark Shadows and all, that we definitely wanted to be a good coder. And ICPC was one platform which gives you some little recognition that yes, you have achieved something.
So
So
for some context to our listeners, right, the ICPC is the Intercollegiate Programming Contest organized by ACM. It's a worldwide contest, which is broken down first at the regional level, and then like people you compete for that, and then there's a national one, and then teams, countries send their representative teams. And IIIT Hyderabad has been consistently having representation in that, and teams are coming out of it. And there are, I think, thousands of teams maybe which compete easily,
yes, yes, it
maybe
is.
more. And this is what Yudhik was talking about. Like they came out uh, in the top 100 in that. So no mean feat, especially when you're doing it in a time way. But Yudhik is being very humble about it.
So basically it's like the World Cup of
Coding, yeah,
algorithms and
competitive
data
coding.
structures and competitive
Yeah.
coding, right? That's what it is. So it's the world stage to at least to reach this level, say number 35 all over India. Great. So you had basically, you looked at computer vision, and you slightly touched upon the fact that it's applied. You looked at an applied, essentially an application of something that you already have in robotics. That was not the first time that you did that, right? Because you also did that in your next project with Professor Vinamari. So
You
tell me a
know,
little bit about that.
yeah, so I think it was one of the greatest journeys I had in my life, and I think I'll be cherishing it for all my life. So, how the thing progressed were that definitely we were going strong in the research which we were doing at the lab, in the computer vision lab. But then there was one course which I had taken as part of one of the electives which we get to choose, and that elective was music induced movement. In very first light, like Vinu has a very great way of presenting things, and she actually presented a problem which was very interdisciplinary. It involved a lot of music, it involved definitely image processing and all that. But the holistic view of the problem which was presented was so interesting that I was definitely affectionated to work towards it. And if I were to describe the problem statement in general, it was about the fact that there have been a lot of studies which discuss about that how when an individual moves, can we try to characterize an individual based on that whether that individual was a male or female, or maybe about we can talk something about their personality. So only thing what I saw from that slide was people dancing. And it was not the people dancing, it was just the 21 or few point joint moments being represented on the screen dancing. And my first intuition was that this is something which I've already done. The amount of work which seemed new to me at that point of time was that given my prior knowledge of 3D, of how when these joint moves, can we somehow correlate with the fact that someone can have a gender-based nuances in how they move, or there can be music embodied in the way you move, be it your personality or be it your music preferences. So that was something which was very interesting. And second thing which was definitely interesting to me was that getting into the scope of music. Getting into the scope of music definitely like widens whatever you're trying to research way a lot. I think the community has in the music side has not only like at that time was mostly dependent on the statistical aspect of things. And where I came from the computer vision world was that I had a good amount of deep learning knowledge. And it
Mm.
was all about applying those knowledge into the field of where mostly it was being dealt with statistical. And that's how I could actually excel in that field alongside working with Minodori.
This
Very
sounds quite
exciting.
fascinating, right? Like if you're just from an abstracted view of how people are moving, you infer more about them. And if you think about it, that this is exactly what we are also doing unconsciously. Like you don't really need to look at the
Correct.
person in detail, right? Even if you see a shadow, say, moving around, and in you can infer things like the gender, maybe maybe not the age, but somehow like the physique and all of that. You can sort of easily, like, that comes so naturally to us.
You know what is so interesting here is just given like movement, right? And like, or a time series of movement, you are kind of telling what is the person's personality. And I don't know if this kind of extends into, say, body language. That's also like a very, very interesting application where often, if somebody is sitting upright, having good eye contact, and usually it signifies that person is kind of confident and wants to engage in conversation. Usually things like, you're looking down, or you have like shrugged shoulders or something like that. You're not interested in conversation, or you're not as confident, and things like that. So these are things that we subconsciously do, and we can kind of gauge this by just looking at another person, right? And now you're trying to teach machines how to do the same thing. So very, very fascinating, very, very fascinating.
And
Um,
the moment you said this, right, that you were teaching machines to say that, what comes to my mind is immediately like the application to something like robotics, probably. But like, because robots, like, one of the common tropes that's been going on is having a assistant, right? One of the tasks that will probably be delegated is
mm,
having some sort of robot doing, like, greeting people, getting something for them, maybe have them as helpers or something like that. And this will become super, super interesting, right? The nuances, what helps us cross that the uncanny cliff, right? This will make the robot seem more approachable to people who might
mm,
be scared about the detriments of a machine, making it natural,
Yeah,
like
I
handling
think the
these.
constant chat which has been going around is how do we actually vision robots alongside the emotions? So we have been
Yes.
seeing few examples recently of how chat GPT has been evolving with the emotions and
Hmm.
stuff. I recently saw a post on LinkedIn where chat GPT kind of closed the chat because he got angry because someone was just posting him the question and just constantly telling him that you're what you're answering is wrong. And they so the whole study was about how we can incorporate the emotions or how the machines can perceive the emotions in such a manner that can be controlled. That's the first thing, because if it is in a completely uncontrollable setup, then we actually don't know where we are moving ahead. So if we are
mhm.
able to do that in a very controlled setup of how the emotions are evolving over time and taking advantage of that situation, of that once you have the information of emotion, you can actually say a lot about a person or about the whole setup as an environment. So that was
Yes.
definitely interesting to look at.
So this was the work with Vinu, right? And this was a course project, you say?
Yeah, so it started as a course project,
Hmm.
and one of the I would say great things about few of the courses as an elective in our colleges, few professor actually says that if you were to go on to publish a paper in this particular course, you would definitely get an A grade without you doing any assignment or without you having an attendance. And to be very, very honest, this is what the stem of my research started, how it started. Because when I went to Veenu Alluri for the first time, that this is something which I would want to try about, she was also skeptical of the fact, given that I was doing such a heavy research in computer vision, and the research over there has very like lot of fundamentals based on technology and lot of mathematics which goes around. When you come to the field of cognitive science, it's more about the abstraction and how you deal with the theoretics of the things around. So when I went to her, she was also skeptical of the fact that she want to take me as a student, as a dual degree student. So it started off as a normal course project that she said that if you can go ahead and publish a paper, come with something serious in this particular coursework, and that's when we will see how the journey will go.
Hmm.
And the good news was that by the end of the course was completed, we were able to publish an A-star conference paper in that course. And when that paper was being submitted, my professor Veenu Alluri actually called me and she had one question to ask, that is, have you decided upon your thesis problem? And that's where I actually got
which
to
is
know for the very
which basically means I want you.
Yeah. You're
that
in.
was the yeah, that was the very first time I actually got to know that yes, I was selected as a student of Veenu. So it was all very fascinating and all very new for me.
Nice.
So that's a pretty high bar, right? Publish a paper, then you become my student. Usually it's the
Yeah.
other way around, that you first
Yeah.
become the student, you work for 2 years, you understand, and then you publish. Nice.
Yeah.
No,
That's
so
a
the best part was like how much help I received from Vinu. And the reason I say that is just to consider the fact that I was just doing a course project. She
Mhm.
was constantly on calls with us, be it night or day. And the biggest part was that we were not only getting support from her, we were actually getting support from her PhD advisor, and that is Petri Tovinian from Finland. So she helped me set up a team in just a coursework of project, and I was able
Mm.
to speak with the people in Finland, speak with the people in England, and I was able to set up this kind of a work, which I actually went ahead and published the thesis on. So it was not something which she actually just left me to explore, and I think I had such a wonderful and great team to work alongside with that it actually started off my complete thesis journey in the whole new setup.
This sounds so wholesome, man. This is very, very nice. I
Mm.
hope like Vinu sees this, and I think she'll also be super proud with this thing, the gratitude. With like it shows, it clearly shows, right? It's a very nice setup.
In this whole field of having this intersection of emotion and machine learning and music, you worked on several problems, right? I kind of want to break down each problem and understand how you have kind of gone about approaching that and what exactly are those specific problems. So the first one is human emotion recognition from lyrics, right? What is like, is it a love song? Is it a song about anger, or there's so much more, right? There is, I think, the lyrics aspect of it. There is, I think, the acoustics aspect of it. There's so much that we
So
actually
give me
subconsciously.
some examples. Like what does this problem mean? Like human emotion recognition from lyrics, right? Like what were you aiming to do?
So maybe I would want to try to set up like a flow path for every viewer as of now.
Hmm.
So the way we actually went ahead and addressed this problem was that we wanted to see how we are able to capture individual differences with anything, with any activity related with music. So as
Hmm.
we all know, musical behavior, be it moving to music, our choices of music, how we react to music, how we consume music has all been modulated by individual differences. So human variations belonging to physical, psychological, or any behavioral characteristics manifest in the choices we make and experiences we seek in everyday life. We all know that no two persons are alike, not even twins. So in general, individuals' response to music, be in term of movement or be in term of their listening strategies, tend to be dictated by the intrinsic features of the music itself, along with the extrinsic features such as our mood states. So particularly, we wanted to investigate musical behavior in two broader domains. One was the active musical engagement, which entails corporeal movement, and second was passive music engagement, which involves the listening to music. The one stream which you were talking about was about music emotion recognition from lyrics. It is about mostly about the passive music engagement. Because when you consume music, you might be consuming music as a background activity or as a foreground activity. I love coding. While I'm doing coding, I might be listening to music. I'm not being actively engaged into the process of listening to music, but definitely it talks about the fact what kind of music I want to listen to. I've seen people back in my college when they were trying to, let's say, solve a coding problem, they would want a very, very quiet environment so that they can concentrate. Some people would be literally an extreme of the things that they would happy to listen to rock music because that actually gets them going and to like concentrate towards a specific problem. And when we talk about more in general about what active music engagement is, that when you are actively dwelled into the music, you would might be embodying it in the form of the way you are trying to listen, and mostly because of the fact that you are trying to produce the music or you're trying to enact the music. Enacting the music would be just dancing around it. So let's say if there are like five untrained dancers, because we believe that they are trained dancers, we definitely cannot extract out the individual differences from the way they enact. But let's say when there are five untrained dancers, you definitely can give them a song which need not be into the very native language, but those dancers would be able to come out with some kind of dance steps around it. That actually tells that each and every individual perceives the music very differently. For some kind of beat would be a concern. For some, it would be completely about the lyrics which they want to delve into. And for some, it will be just completely about their rhythm. what the music is, how the music was flowing. So what we realized was that all was about how we were trying to perceive the emotions in the music, which actually bring our ability of doing or enacting around the music. So this was the whole paradigm of how we wanted to lay our foundation of the research into the two broader domain of active engagement with the music and the passive engagement with the music. And I've done research almost on both the fronts, and we have found and like a complete evidences of the fact that yes, someone's individual differences is being completely noticed based on their be it their active engagement or be it their passive engagement.
So I have two questions. First, I'll talk about what is in continuation to this, right? So when you say in reference to the specific task, this human emotion recognition, like what was your takeaway from that? Was it that the confirmation that yes, individual differences are being are manifesting in the choice of music that people are making? Is it that, or is it something along the lines of the other way around, that the music itself is affecting the emotion that people are feeling is independent, rather the same piece of music induces different kinds of emotions? What was the takeaway from this kind of this research? I'm trying to understand that.
I think it's a very good question because
Mhm.
few of the very past studies which have tried to like deal with the very question which you are asking were trying to look at either side of the things, whether
Mhm.
we are trying to listen to the music based on the personality which we have,
Mhm.
or if we have some music being heard, how as an individual we would be affected by that music. And all in all, the research says that both of the statement are true, that we consume a music because of the fact that we belong to certain individual differences. And it's also true that the way we perceive things as being a belonging to a specific personality or belonging to specific gender, that also affects or the way we want to consume the music in general. So
And
as a problem of music emotion recognition from lyrics, so the information retrieval and recommendation, be it in the form of news, music, goods, or any images, is crucial in e-commerce and or on demand.
Mhm.
So I'm
Mhm.
trying to get to the fact that why we wanted to do this.
Right.
So my research in this community started in almost 2020, and it was almost the peak of COVID pandemic. In the peak of COVID pandemic, the music streaming platform, specifically the Spotify, has witnessed a staggering rise in the users. And statistically, they had like just 6 million subscribers in the first quarter of the year. And now they had crossed more than 144 million paid subscribers and still counting. So you can see that their staggering rise was just all because of the COVID pandemic, and it made people realize that how music could be so involved in their life. So the content aspect, like the content-based aspect of the music information retrieval systems, on the other hand, is like focused primarily on the acoustic contents.
Mhm.
Like the problem statement was music emotion recognition from lyrics. So has specifically focused on the acoustic content and maybe the social tags of the particular music, and maybe some emotions and moods driven from them. But lyrics were largely neglected despite the crucial role they play. So like specifically, eliciting emotions is a key factor, and it gives a musical reward, and it helps reflecting a user traits and tendencies which are linked to the musical preferences. So this was the whole idea that we wanted to study largely lyrics part of the music and how the lyrics was being dealt and being treated by different individuals in the way they want to listen to the music.
Yeah, this is fascinating to me personally, because I've thought about this myself, and I, as a person, as my personality has changed over the years. Originally, my preferences were I did not pay any attention to the lyrics, to be honest, to decide whether I liked the music or not. It's just the acoustic, like the thing that you're talking about, right? The acoustic signature, whether that resonated with me, then I didn't like get boxed into one genre or something. Anything doesn't matter. And if it sounds nice to me, it just sounds nice. I don't care about the lyrics are, even if they're explicit, I really don't care. But over time, I guess like I have discovered this side of me also that focuses based on the lyrics. I would like maybe this is a song which I don't like initially, but when I listen to the lyrics and the deep meaning behind it itself, that resonates with me. That's resonated with the past experience I've had. And yeah. That's very interesting. Like even to be seeing this, and of course, as you mentioned, right, there's a very commercial application of it, and
Yes.
in these, I mean, all the businesses they would be interested in this because they make money out of it.
Yeah. And I
One,
think we were on the way. Sorry, Abhinav. Yeah,
no,
you
no,
can
no,
go
go
ahead.
ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we were on the actually right timeline of why when we wanted to address the lyrics. And the reason I say that was that acoustic was always being dealt in the Fourier transform, and you can actually pull out the
Yes,
frequencies, and
correct.
you had all the, I would say, technical knowledge around what you wanted to do with it. With the lyrics, the shortcomings were how you would want to put a lyrics as a whole with an emotion. Like if you consider past researches based on like 2015 or 2016, if I were to address this problem, how would I have done it is, or how the past researchers have done it is that they would have a complete song and
Hmm.
each word have an emotion represented along with it. So if I wanted to do research of how that lyrics had an emotion of a whole, the only drawback was that people cannot just formulate a contextual information. They just were aggregating the emotions of the individual word. So what I'm trying to
Sort
get
of.
to is the fact
I
that
see
let's
this.
say a Rihanna can have a song and maybe some rapper Travis Scott might have a song. Both can use very strong words, but when they use those very strong or maybe abusive words, the context, how they were trying to put that particular word might completely change, or might completely change the way they want to bring out in the song. Travis Scott, it's more energetic, and the way he would want to use those abusive words or the very strong words would be just to bring out the energy and that kind of zeal and
Hmm.
motivation from inside you. Or maybe that is the reason why you specifically choose to listen to these kinds of music when you are in gym. And when you
Yes.
completely see this thing in songs by maybe Olivia Rodriguez or Taylor Swift, you would have a clear reason of why that particular angry word was being chosen at that specific. So all the previous researchers could not take the advantage of the recent technologies like transformers or the attentive neural network. All they had was the vector-based embeddings, and they would just maybe aggregate the emotional score of all the words, and that's when they got this information of the lyrics as an emotion as a whole. And when we were trying to deal with in the setup in 2020, we had all the liberty of using things like transformers, neural network, where we can actually bring in the context into the picture. And I think bringing the context into the picture was the biggest game when you're trying to deal with the lyrics.
Right.
It's very interesting, man. Very interesting. So essentially, the last part that you touched upon, which is that the context, which is the correlation between the lyrics and the acoustics. Who is singing and what kind of context they want to actually give it to that. It could essentially be the same lyrics, right? But depending on, let's say, the kind of acoustics or the kind of essentially background score and the energy, all of these other factors, the same lyrics could evoke
Yeah.
very different emotions in the same
Yeah.
person or in different people. That's very, very fascinating. And
And
true, right? It's all based on personal experience. That's how it is, right? We often heard the same song actually, like, let's say, resung on many of these talent shows with their own renditions. It's their own spin on top of it, and that evokes a very different kind of emotion,
Right.
right,
right?
right.
So that's very, very interesting. The second thing also, I think one thing that Debayan touched upon is that his taste evolved over time, right? So which means this can also be, I'm just wondering, right? I'm thinking out open. So this can also be used for tracking changes in personality,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Changes in personality, which is also very fascinating because I'm wondering if it is capable of extracting such extreme changes in personality that maybe it can be modeled as a medical problem, right? So
Something.
that is just like, I'm just putting it out there. I don't know if it's possible, not possible, but really, really fascinating. Really
Yeah, this
fascinating.
this makes me think also, right? Because this has applications, like real world applications, not just in terms of like, maybe you can think of it as a negative thing, but as a surveillance, but it could be something which is very useful, like in therapy, right? You can steer your treatment according to that, and you can use this as a signal properly, right? When you know that this kind of a music mode has a correlation of, like, the person's personality type, so this is the expected response, versus if you play this kind of music. I'm just thinking out loud. Okay, this is me who has no clue about this. You're the
What's
expert
your
here.
What's your take on this, Yudhik? Is there work around this kind of stuff?
I think you both actually picked a very, very good pointer of why this research was actually important in the domains.
Hmm.
So when we do some kind of research, what people in the end would want is some kind of conclusions and how this research would actually help the
In the
community.
real world,
And
correct.
the biggest point was that when I say that this individual differences or the way you dance can help me perceive your individual differences, that is like your personality. So one of the common models which in the personality we study is a BFI model, which is called Big Five Inventory Model,
Big,
which has
yes.
which has put the personalities in specifically five different five
Hmm.
zones, that is openness, agreeableness, and out of those five, one is neuroticism. So neuroticism is the way of is the negative polarity of how researchers wanted to study emotional stability. So
Oh,
the neuroticism would
hmm.
directly be can be seen same as emotional instability. So
Right.
the reason we wanted to do this kind of paradigm, like this kind of a setup, was if I'm able to predict someone's neurotic nature, that can help me in early detection of things like ADHD, which can be dealt way ahead, like before going way ahead into the future. And these
Definitely.
were all the therapeutic outcomes that can be actually implied upon based on you are able to do the individual differences.
Hmm.
Based like given that you are able to decode those individual differences from the music uh, induced moments. And there is one very interesting thing which I would want to highlight from this research. So everything which we have tried to done, like someone might come to me and just like they can question the fact that although you are trying to just predict the neurotic behavior, why can't we just do this very simply in a lab-based setup where you are just given a 14, maybe 14 questions, a questionnaire of 14 questions. You can fill that question and you will already have that evaluated. That is
Hmm.
actually very true. You can evaluate that. But what is the biggest concern over there? That is not a in the wild setup. When I mean in the wild setup, the biggest problem is that me as a person has a tendency for social acceptability. When you
Right,
ask me a
right.
question, I there can be specific, there can be tons of things which is going around in my head. I know what is the answer, what you are trying to ask, but I can
Hmm.
modulate the way I speak. I can modulate the answer how you want to perceive it.
Hmm.
I can answer it in such a way that you perceive me differently. And
Hmm.
that was the biggest problem of this in this particular field of research, that although we are trying to deal with the personality, but it was a questionnaire setup where it was not being modulated in the file.
Hmm.
So when we try to study things with the active engagement and the passive engagement, it's a very good example when I can just say that Debayan, I want your phone. I just want to see what songs you're listening
Yeah,
on Spotify. Your listening on the Spotify would not be modulated by the fact that I would want to see that particular
correct.
song in your music listening history. That is complete session which you as an individual has lived it through that session yourself. And again, when we say enact to the music, that can again bring some like I can say social acceptability nuances towards it. But when there
Hmm.
are untrained dancers, they again cannot modulate such a profound manner that it would actually change the way they want to make their personality perceived. So it was all
Hmm.
about how we can try to evaluate these things in the wild setup, and all those things can be mitigated. What has been a major limitations of the past research work.
And
This
how
actually,
successful was it actually? In the sense that you're saying here, I want to predict if somebody is unstable or so essentially you're trying to understand the subconscious, right? So this whole process, and not put people in the setting where they can actually control their outcomes based on
the
what they think
conscious
is the
and yeah, there's a filter
yeah,
that's
exactly, they
applied.
think is
Yeah.
right. So how
So
actually successful were you?
I actually want to add to that. So I had two questions. Second question, first question I'll park for later, but in relation to this, right? That is this applied already in the system because you touched upon Spotify, and doesn't this raise concerns of basically some sort of privacy, you can say, right? Maybe
Hmm.
because this
Yeah,
naturally raises that because you
I
are
was thinking
sort
about
of
the same thing,
inherent.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yes.
are people aware of this?
Yeah, so that's a very good point. And again, all these companies would never allow us to get this data from anywhere or any API unless and until we hack some systems. So
Hmm.
the way we actually got a hold of this data was that there was one more stream of research which was being done on the last FM data, which was done by my seniors in this very same lab.
Hmm.
So the work which they were trying to do was they were trying to get the user's data by letting them know by some kind of freebie mechanism, or you can say that you give them some incentive that I want that data. But in return, the way we would want to use that data is that we would have their actual personality scores and their complete music listening history. The way we are trying to mask the identity of a person is just not by using their actual name and instead putting an alias around it. So the people might be happy to give their complete listening history and everything, given that you are confirming to the user that we will be putting an alias and we would just
Anonymizing, basically.
yes. So it was this kind of incentive mechanism which was set around, and we were able to get a hold of a data set where we actually had a music listening history. And that music listening history cannot be just like song A, B, C, D, E were being played in the someone session. The very big nuance of this whole music listening history was at what particular time you listen to what particular music.
Context. Correct.
Because again, I want to know the context of when you're listening a song in a session. So for all the viewers, what is a session? Session is, let's say, when you're listening a song, there can be bunch of songs which you would want to listen in one active journey of that particular music which you are trying to listen. So morning time, you are completely, when you're just awake, you might want to listen few set of songs, and those set of songs will have some context around it. Might be I'm back with my friends back in evening. I might be listening party songs. So it will be complete session of all the party songs. So if I were just to dump you the music listening history without the time into the picture, then I would actually lose the notion of a session and I would not be able to use the data. So definitely that was one of the key pointers of the data, that along with the song, what song was played, we also know at what time it was being played. And that helped me put the songs into the sessions. Like that was our grouping mechanism and how we studied the whole data.
One thing that is just popping into I have to just say it out because it's the running thought right now. It's just letting my like mind run wild, and I'm thinking like if Spotify has this, like I'm using Spotify as a proxy here, but any music streaming service, right? One of the things is from that you have the time at which the song is playing. But you imagine if there are multiple people with the same app who are subscribers of the same app, and they are there together, but you're playing from only one device and using these, because phones today are like a treasure trove of data, right? All they've been sensing all the time. Your the place that you're in, the time, the weather, all of that, you'll have everything. So you can sort of even segment, right? You can get sort of these clusters of, you can infer societal, like these things that people, that this kind of a song is linked to sort of party theme or a fun emotion, right? And a group setting. And at the same time, you can infer that there are so many people who are there at the same location. They may not be playing the same thing, but they're listening to that kind of an audio. And maybe so this group of people is someone who's like like a close-knit group. And you can use this can, I mean, I know this can also be used for dystopian stuff. I mean, this is sort of like Black Mirror stuff. But advertising and all of that, right? It's just the possibilities. I mean, it can be
It's
done.
actually huge. Like basically, if Spotify and Facebook they have a partnership, I think all of us are screwed. Right? Because the stuff that you're saying, where people can kind of infer who are close to each other and what kind of activities they perform together, and also all these targeted ads. It's an insane amount of data. Nowadays,
So,
most of the browsing, at best, like most of the inference happens from browsing, perhaps the post that we make, some communication. You're adding a new modality here of information, right? It's music. It's completely new modality. It's actually untouched. I don't think
which is
in any of the
unadulterated
commercial.
also, right? Which is in public opinion, like music is not seen as, because right now with all the awareness about the social media, like the data breaches and all, people are conscious about when they're engaging with the app. But with music, there is nothing, no filter.
Exactly.
And
see, you can control what you say, but how could you control what you listen to? You can't just listen to something specific because you want to project an image.
And maybe even if you're doing it, that would be restricted to a particular session. So definitely the way we perceive the data, we have such a holistic view of a person that it's a very true documentary. If anyone of you has seen, is The Social Dilemma. So The Social Dilemma, the Netflix documentary, it talks about the fact that when someone is just browsing through the Facebook, or they just stop at a post, Facebook already knows that whether you are liking a person or what kind of affinity or what kind of affection you have towards something. So all those data is already present to the Facebook and streaming services like Spotify. It's all about putting them together.
Yeah, so I'm getting goosebumps right now because my mind is running wild, and I'm thinking like the application that we discussed right now is more like from the point of view of a capitalist, like this thing, right? For
Yes.
something for greed. Whereas, but I'm
Yes.
thinking even from a point of view of doing good, right? Because this touched upon the neurotic detection that you're talking about.
Hmm.
Imagine that, and if you combine that with the societal clustering that I was talking about, if you combine them together, can this even be a you can even create an early warning system, right? Of say to avoid mass shootings or something like that. Because if they are going for such an like for if someone is in that that they're emotionally unstable and that they are going to a place with a lot of people and the kind of songs they're listening, maybe they're the ones that induce anger, the ones that induce rage. That could be a sort of signal, right, to maybe law enforcement or something that maybe something bad is going, and that's an early warning system. I know it's if you're on the receiving end, it's obviously you'll be spooked out by it, but yeah, and think about it, and that's a new
Yeah.
modality of surveillance, man. I had not
Exactly,
thought
it's a
about
new
it.
modality. Exactly.
Yeah, and I think going more into the dystopian talks which you are doing right now. So
Yeah.
when we were talking about the individual differences which are based on gender, male and female, or the personality and music preferences, what we also our model was successfully able to do was guess the empathic trait of a person. So this is
Hmm.
where the Bayan you were trying to get that empathic trait of person is actually being evaluated in two parts, which is empathizing quotient and systemizing quotient. And there is
Hmm.
all those theory that once you have that EQ and SQ scores, you can actually talk about what is the ADHD score of a person. That
I see.
you can talk about that someone being more empathetic and someone being more systemizing. So all those things are actually being predicted in such a good, accurate manner. And yeah,
How
that can
accurate,
be
man?
very
How
good.
accurate? I really want to know.
Yeah.
Like,
Is this
and
available in the public domain? Like your research paper go into this in details?
Yes, we do.
Hey,
about
you
the about the fit of the model, or maybe how good we were actually doing to answer Abhinav's question. So the way we actually wanted to discuss this thing was based on some kind of metric. So the measure we actually used at that time was, being it a machine learning model, we used a score, something which is called R square. So R square
Mhm.
score is something which tells about how fit or how good the model actually is on the data or on the unseen data. So over there, I can tell you that what the best modality which we had used, that is, we were actually considering both a person position of a joint and maybe person's velocity of a joint. But again, everything is again just the joint space. So over there, we actually had a very high score for R squares, specifically for the systemizing, and it was about 86.7% fit. And for the empathizing also, it was about 77.1% fit. So these numbers actually tells that how well our model could fit even on a very smaller set of the data. And the way we are able to predict empathizing quotient and systemizing quotient, that is with the age-old models like machine learning, that was very high. So yes, these models have got into our nerves where they are able to predict each and everything about us.
this is very scary, I must say. This is actually very scary because
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of the corporate companies, they are aware of a lot of these things, and it potentially might be in pipeline. Yeah, so I'm genuinely scared because I mean, so music is something I just can't control, right? I listen to what I want to listen to, and if somebody can subconsciously tell things about me, browsing is certainly up to an extent I can. I don't know how to mitigate music. That's the main
I
No, no,
issue.
think
no,
I can answer your question in a very quick example, that there might be a reason. Okay, so what is the music streaming app which you're using, Abhinav, right now on your phone?
From now onwards, one song in each platform.
Okay, that's a
Most of
good
the time,
answer.
it's YouTube music, because I have a ton of playlists there, or it's actually over the years I've kind of cycled through different platforms, but right now it's YouTube music.
Okay, so yes, definitely there is a reason that you might want to choose maybe an Apple Music or a Spotify, because these apps have been becoming so good in the music recommendation that what
Hmm.
all we care about is music recommendation. We do not
Hmm.
want to consider any other factor, but till the time the music recommendation is good, we definitely like the fact that yes, the next music is something which I would want to hear, and I don't want to like interact physically to the system, and I want to continue with this. And
Right.
as good as the music recommendation goes, you should know that that is the whole
Proxy.
information which the model has about you.
Mm.
It's
Yes.
basically, and they're probably employing SOTA models. So that's state of the art. And you're talking about research from 2020. So you know the things might have
Yes.
definitely moved ahead
Yes.
in the like couple of years.